The Chinese spy balloon has a lot of people talking about what type of foreign investments and activities are happening right in our own backyards, because it's happening a lot more than you think. In fact, China's the second largest private owner of farmland in the U.S. And just last night in the city of Grand Forks, North Dakota, a group of determined residents fought back against a project planned by a Chinese company suspiciously close to an Air Force base, and they won. Senior national correspondent Brian Enton is live in Grand Forks. And Brian, the opposition was quite vocal.
It was, Nicole. We are outside Grand Forks Air Force Base now. And at the end of the day, this is really a story about everyday American people who took on China, who took on their own city council because they were so worried that this Chinese corn mill was going to go in very, very close to this military base. We all saw the Chinese spy balloon. It got all the attention and is still in the headlines.
Ladies and gentlemen, from the flight deck.
But 1,700 miles away from where the balloon was shot down, in the middle of America, in Grand Forks, North Dakota, the fight against Chinese spying might not be quite as visible, but look closely, and it's here. What concerns you the most about it being a Chinese company?
Well, I mean, it just kind of, to me, is common sense. You read about what China does in the world. I mean, they're not shy about what their intentions are. You know, they want to take over everything.
Lifelong Grand Forks resident Ben Gradzileski is talking about Chinese company Fufeng and the 300-plus acres they own on the outskirts of town, with plans to build a massive corn mill. So is it this area over here?
Correct. It goes extends past those tanks about a mile north.
Keep out signs are on the perimeter of the Chinese-owned property, and it's just 12 miles, a straight shot from Grand Forks Air Force Base. What's the main concern with it being this close to the base?
The line of sight. You know, the base is basically a drone base, and there's a lot of private companies out there developing new technology all the time.
U.S. surveillance drones and intelligence, it all happens here. Despite that, for a year, the Grand Forks City Council let the Chinese project continue, even while citizens expressed outrage and organized. The Air Force wrote this letter saying the proposed project presents a significant threat to national security with both near and long-term risks of significant impacts to our operations in the area.
You asked for him to be dealt with.
And it all came to a head at a very heated city council meeting last night.
You've sold us out to China.
How can you defend yourself against a foreign enemy against the United States?
You have not only embarrassed yourself, but the people of this community. You should hold your head in utter shame.
The Grand Forks residents had enough.
There is no way that an apology can suffice for the hell that you have put all of us through.
Hell, because the residents say their voices against the Chinese project have gone ignored.
What's going on in Grand Forks? How can they not see that this is a Chinese company that's connected to the CCP?
A company that has been deemed a national security threat now owns approximately 360 acres in our town because of a transaction that you promoted.
Then cheers when, after more than a year, the council officially killed the Fufeng project after essentially being forced to kill the deal by the federal government. Do you regret supporting the Fufeng project?
Well, I think in the end, you know, seeing that it is a national security threat, of course.
So the project is stopped in Grand Forks, but this isn't just about North Dakota. The USDA reports Chinese entities own 383,935 acres of U.S. farmland. Over the past 5 years, Chinese ownership has increased 55%. The Chinese-owned land is spread out across the country, but almost 3/4 of it is in the South. In North Dakota, the residents are celebrating after a hard-fought fight, but they realize for America, this is only just the beginning. Chinese-owned companies are buying land all over the country. There are other communities either in or going to probably be in the same situation you were in with your town.
Right.
What's your advice?
And that currently are in. I tell you, even with the Facebook page that we have now, we've heard from people in Arizona and Florida and Texas, you know, how are you doing this? And my advice is saying you have to be a voice. You have to have the courage to step forward. You have to be you have to form a grassroots group that is willing to fight and keep up the fight.
And the residents here really did fight and fight and fight. Obviously, a lot of relief now that this project is stopped, but still a lot of unknowns, Nicole, because that Chinese-owned company, while they won't be able to build the mill near this Air Force base, they still currently own the 300 acres of land. Nicole?
Yeah, those residents really showing the power of democracy. Okay. Thank you, Brian. Well, for more insight on this, we're now joined by Republican Senator Kevin Cramer of North Dakota. Senator Cramer, thank you so much for giving us some time on, I know what is a very busy day. So we just saw that report from Brian. How did this situation get all the way to this point before someone did something about it?
Well, first of all, thank you for doing such a great job. And Brian did a good job talking to the people that really did rise up. And they rose up over a year ago in opposition, and then there were thousands of them. It wasn't just a few of them. All of that said, there's this strong desire, and understandably so, for value-added agricultural opportunities in the breadbasket of the world. And you know, on its face, I guess it looked like a pretty good idea. Personally, I'm a member of the Senate Armed Services Committee. I opposed this project from the beginning as well, and did my best to try to educate the City Commission on the threats that China poses, not just, by the way, not just to the Air Force Base, which are significant, and you did a good job of covering why it's an important base, but just to our supply chain, our food supply chain, and other critical supply chains. I think the pandemic, if it taught us nothing else, it should have taught us that China has too much control over critical supply chains, not just food, but pharmaceuticals, critical minerals, and energy. There are just a lot of ways that China is trying to win the global war economically, militarily, and frankly, the hearts and minds of the world. So the people of Grand Forks stood up. They became the flashpoint, and I think you do a good job in the story identifying that this is just one community where you know, the good guys won, so to speak, and thank goodness the Air Force finally took their position and stated their position. I think for a long time, the Air Force was respecting the leadership of Grand Forks, wanting them to work through the process, but eventually the Air Force just had to say this is a serious risk, and that ended the project. All of that said, I think what's happening in Grand Forks is really the beginning of the end of Chinese investment, particularly in the food supply chain in this country. A number of members of Congress, including myself, are signing on to bills to prohibit China and, frankly, other enemies from acquiring more food supply investments in the United States.
Well, Senator, along those lines, I mean, as Brian just told us, China still owns that piece of land. So what happens now?
They do. Yeah, so important point. I don't know how much of it can be unwound, but I do know this much, that there's no way that they'll ever get a permit to put a building on it, put water or any type of infrastructure that would be used for spying, because without some sort of infrastructure to both hide surveillance equipment and get it elevated enough to have a line of sight, it would be very difficult to use that land apart from some infrastructure. So I'm pretty confident that the city will see to it that that never happens, and ultimately the best thing would be for Fufang to sell the property either back to the original owners, or better yet, you know, the city, so you know they can make it into an industrial park that we can try to bring some other more suitable development to.
Well, you know, Senator, what about Americans, you know, like these people there in Grand Forks at this meeting who
Yes.
felt like, or who feel like, no one was listening to them, no one was listening to their concerns?
Well, for sure, there was a conflict among local leadership in Grand Forks, and I grieve that it took this long, really. I tried hard to convince the city to make this decision a year ago and have been ever since. All of that said, what I hope the people of Grand Forks can do now is unify around their opposition, but now unify to a replacement and to a mission that is more suitable, as I said, work together to find more suitable suitors. I mean, Senator Hoeven, Governor Burgum, and I have committed ourselves to using our resources to try to advocate for some other type of investment there in Grand Forks that would be, like I said, more suitable. And we've already done a lot of that, both at the Grand Forks Air Force Base and bringing new missions. We have a space mission there now where there's a ground station for low Earth orbiting satellites. We have a brand new next generation ISR mission coming to the Grand Forks Air Force Base. We have a number of private sector companies led by Northrop Grumman and General Atomics that occupy Grand Sky Park that's associated with the Grand Forks Air Force Base, or connected to it, where they do testing and training for pilots. So Grand Forks is a great ecosystem for this kind of development. We can get this one behind us. And then, more importantly, when you say people didn't listen to them, I'm pretty sure they cured that in Grand Forks.
Oh, yeah.
And now I think that same attitude spreads throughout the country, and others now have an easier path to convincing their leaders to not go the way of Chinese investment.
Well, Senator Cramer, live for us there in the Capitol. Thank you so much for your time.